Hey, everybody. I'm in for Mary Trump. This is Jen Taub. You know me as a nerd avenger and also host of the podcast Booked Up with Jen Taub, where we have conversations with you, me, and your favorite authors. And I will soon be joined by some of the other nerds because it's not like we have anything to talk about today. No news over the long holiday weekend or anything. Um, so the biggest thing on our plate, I think, is it's hard to know, but I think I'm going to start and just kind of clear this out of the way. We now have seen that no one is above the law, not even the president's son. And it looks like Hunter Biden has struck a plea deal, which is normal in our criminal justice system, where he is apparently going to go in later this week to plead guilty to two misdemeanors of failing to file 2 years of tax returns on time. And apparently, if he behaves himself, then he will not be charged with an additional offense, which was, I guess, applying for some kind of handgun application, and either lying on the form or not acknowledging that he was in the throes of addiction at the time. I think that's the bottom line. This plea does not come with any kind of prison sentence, which is fairly common for a misdemeanor, and he's going to hopefully move forward with his recovery. I mean, so many people we've talked about here on Nerd Avengers struggle with mental health and with addiction. And certainly, as part of the recovery process, many people look to the STEP program or other ways to make amends. And I think this is an important step in that journey. I think it's really great that he has a supportive family. I think there was a statement from a spokesperson for the Bidens indicating that they weren't going to make any comments beyond that they love their son, and I think just hope that he can now move forward, which I think any of us would want for a family member. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Jen, what's up?
I decided to lead with the Hunter Biden plea deal.
Oh, it's above
And
the law, baby.
that's right. And talked a bit. I had moved to the topic of mental health and recovery and having parents who support that process. Do you have any thoughts on this yourself at all?
On which one?
We're
Donald
starting
Trump?
with the Hunter Biden plea deal about not paying his taxes.
Well, I think you'll hear Donald Trump screaming very shortly that he got preferential treatment, and then he'll turn around and beg for a plea deal. That's where I think it'll go with as far as Trump. I think it's now it's worthy of talking about in the news because it's finally, there's a charges and a plea deal, so we can finally speak about it openly, which is a good thing, and we should
Mm-hmm.
probably be doing more of that. And then what was your second question? I'm sorry.
I mean, I think I was still talking about, I mean, there's different, as I often say, those of us who are lawyers, many of us, are half lawyer, half human. And so looking at the human side of mental health and addiction, and nice glasses.
Thank you. When you talk about lawyers and mental health, that's how I keep mine.
Yeah, no, I mean, just, yeah, dialing the sun down a bit, right? No, but,
Yeah.
but in all seriousness, this is a complicated situation. Whenever you're a public figure, you have a family. The family doesn't choose for you to be in that position. And in his case, it looks like Hunter did take advantage of his father's, his connections when he was VP. It's not like other folks don't do that. I'm not fond of nepotism, but it's not a crime. And I mean, I think I've said almost everything I need to say about Hunter Biden before we move on to the other news of the long
Well,
weekend and day. But unless you
talking about
think we
as
should,
far as mental health goes, yeah, um, one of the biggest problems in this country is a lack of investment in mental health. Of course, that began with Ronald Reagan when when we started creating more homeless by kicking people out of mental institutions that people who needed it. So that's and I don't know Hunter's. I've barely seen the man. I couldn't tell you anything about him other than
right?
that what's on the public record. And yeah, and you got to give look, man, you got to give Joe Biden this. He's gone through a lot in his life, so having to deal with this is that's what families do,
That's
unfortunately.
right. Oh my God, Waj, I'm so glad you're here. We're done now talking about Hunter Biden, but I want to point out to you, Waj, that I see where you move my book. I
Where?
see my book is no other way. And Michael was watching you on MSNBC, and it was like the way the crayon was working, the book was right above it. And he was like, what a mensch Waj is,
See that?
you
I
know.
know. Look, I got all these all my friends' books that just came out are there. Yours is always right there.
I love it. I
And
love it.
Brian
And
never sent me his book, so he's dead to me.
oh, you know what? I bought Brian's book, Waj, and I
Yeah.
Oh
put it
wow.
on the shelf. I
So
mean, just
this is the only
saying.
time
I
I'm gonna
bought
be.
yours, Jen. It's back there.
So how are
They,
you? Do you want to say anything now about the? Let's talk about the important news of the day. Now that you're here, we're all here. Waj, what do you think about the news that broke in the Washington Post? Some of it was old, some of it was new. About how Merrick Garland was throwing sands in the wheel of the investigation into Donald Trump's role in the um, in the insurrection and the attempt to either delay or prevent the electoral count vote and thus a
actually
self
the
coup.
news broke because I saw first before I read the article, I saw your direct message, uh, where you sent us nerds that specific highlighted aspect of the
Oh, I
article.
took a screenshot of the
You took a
article. Yeah.
screenshot and then you highlighted that aspect of the article, and specifically what you highlighted was how they slow walked it for I think a year, um, and
15 months. I mean, yeah, a year from when he was in office, but 15 months from the
and
insurrection.
much to
Yeah.
the chagrin of actual agents themselves, who were deeply frustrated that there wasn't movement, and to the fact that you couldn't mention the T word to
Yes.
Christopher Wray, and so it's one of those situations where those of us who, especially people of color, who have been skeptical, it's because law enforcement agencies have employed a double standard against people of color, against poor people, because oftentimes you don't witness justice and accountability or swift justice when the perpetrator is white, and specifically this type of both sides mindset that has, as we've talked about often, because we know this industry has paralyzed the media into creating a false equivalence. You see that affecting law enforcement as well, right? Because in order to preserve the integrity and reputation of an institution that Republicans still call deep state, right? It doesn't matter. Like they're basically trying to win over in court a base that sees them now as groomers and pedophiles run by Jewish overlords, right? That they hate them, but they're like, oh no. In order to be seen fair, in order to preserve the integrity of our brand, let's slow walk this potential prosecution. And they didn't even make any movements on him, literally, just like he did yesterday on Fox News. Like he literally is on the phone admitting the crime in Georgia. So if you actually care about law and order, and you're sitting there, you're watching, like it's almost like watching a robber go into a bank, come out with satchels of money, high five the cop, and say, "I'm gonna go back." And they're like, "All right, well, nah, you go back in there." That's my Ralph Wiggums. That's my Chief Wiggums impression, by the way. And he just is sitting there eating your donut. And then even yesterday, right? If you watch the Brett Baer interview,
I
actually
don't
did a
get
pretty
that
good job.
reference. Who's
Huh?
Chief Wiggins? I
Oh
don't
my
get.
goodness gracious! Come on.
And that was actually a good impression too, Jen. That's
It wasn't
very
bad.
true. Yeah.
I'll give you that one.
Okay, go back in there. Yeah, okay, thank you. And then also, if you see the Brett Baer interview yesterday with Fox, he actually did a good job. You have Donald Trump again self-incriminating himself, and you sit there and you go, any other person, this is a gift for any prosecution. But with Donald Trump, and this I might be too cynical, Brian and Jen. I said with Donald Trump, watch, nothing's gonna happen to him. I hope I'm wrong.
I don't. I think he's done.
You think so?
Yeah. Look, you read that. I I keep reading over the indictment, and I know the guy that's it's going after him, Jack Smith, and I see that there's a lot of stuff that's not in that indictment. That like what happened in Bedminster, where the other there's, or these just the 30 or so documents that they feel comfortable with, or they're even more dangerous documents that he had that we're not hearing about. But he said none of this evidence that we've seen in the indictment that is damning came from anyone other than himself or from the people who worked with him.
But I just want to be really careful,
That's
Brian. But I just want to back up for 1 second, because I don't want to conflate the many different criminal cases against Donald Trump. Yes,
no, I'm talking specifically about the one that's he's charged for,
and whether he's done or not done, politically. I want to, for 1 second,
I think he's going to go to prison.
Well, before we get into, because I want to hold off for 1 second or many seconds before we get into what's going on with the Mar-a-Lago documents case down in federal court in Florida. I still want to hold for 1 second on the insurrection.
Well, I think he'll be charged for that too.
But hold on, I want to talk about why delay matters, because to some degree, I hear what you're saying, and but this is a philosophical question. Do the ends justify the means? We cannot predict the ends yet. And the means here were delay. And what happens during delay? Garland walks into office, gets sworn in, March 11th, 2021. He's handed on a silver platter the Mueller investigation, which in Volume 2 has credible, detailed, factual allegations, right, of the obstruction of the Mueller investigation. That gets sat on. Clock runs on that. Also, Michael Cohen, you know him, right, goes to prison for the hush money payments, federal prison. That also, Garland lets the clock run on that. What goes on in the meantime? Well, when they didn't act on those things, what do we see happen? Well, he maybe felt even more emboldened, holds on to all these documents. These things, bit by bit, have a cumulative effect. He thinks he's Teflon. He thinks he's above the law. Getting fucking prosecuted doesn't bring back the lives of the people, the agents abroad who cooperated with the U.S. Their lives, their families, they're dead, or their lives are destroyed because we know that. Remember, there was a roundup of people. We believe that it's because Donald Trump leaked some of this information about our intelligence assets. We don't get back our reputation for this. So those things have already happened. And then, again, before we get to the documents case, slow walking this investigation is damaging to the reputation of the Justice Department. If Merrick Garland went in with the goal of restoring public faith in the Department of Justice, someone should have, and he's a very smart man. I don't understand how he doesn't get the logic of this. If you take the premise, if you believe the Department of Justice, if you believe that the Department of Justice actually was corrupted and the public didn't have faith in them, what you're saying is that the people who came before you had policies and practices that you would not want to follow yourself. So going then and following those policies and practices does not clean up the reputation, number one.
Nope.
And number two, everything that Garland was about was not politicizing the Department of Justice, he said. But he did by dragging this out for political reasons, so he wouldn't look partisan. And finally, three, there are a lot of people who, and I understand why they would be confused, who shout in all caps on the internet, it's not Garland, it's the FBI. It's not the Justice Department, it's the FBI. Well, look at a fucking org chart, people. The FBI report is part of the Department of Justice. It's a bureau of the Department of Justice. On the FBI's own website, they make clear the director of the FBI, meaning Chris Wray, is reports to the Attorney General, period. Now, I know both the Attorney General and Chris Wray are both appointed by the president, subject to Senate confirmation. And no, Merrick Garland couldn't fire Chris Wray. But that's not what this article says. Nowhere in this article does it say that Merrick Garland was frustrated with Chris Wray, or he was unhappy that the people over in whatever office in his own Department of Justice, Attorney General, U.S. Attorney's Office, or that anyone in the FBI was dragging their feet. That's not this article. This article is he went along with the bottom-up only investigation, and that you weren't supposed to say the T word, period. And that is a problem regardless. And okay, now that's my argument. You can disagree, and I want to hear why I'm wrong. If that's
no, I agree with you.
Oh,
I have a couple of questions. What makes you think that the actions taken by Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice uh, had the intent behind them that you claim that they do?
The intent? I'm
Yes,
sorry. Say that again. What
the
intent am I
intent.
imputing?
Well, the intent that you stated was that he was trying to be politically correct and play both sides, and that politicized the Department of Justice. Whereas I happen to know some of the investigators, and I never got that feeling from them. The investigators that were handling the case, the what I was always told, what I've been continually told, what I they continue to say is that if you're shooting for the top guy, you better not miss. And when it comes to Donald Trump, you better have all your T's
How can you get your ducks in a row if you won't look at the ducks, though? What this says is they were not even in, there was not even an investigation until April of 2022. And Brian, why didn't he appoint a special counsel on March 12th of 2021? What do you think?
Why do I? Because I think that there are a variety. Well, what I was told is that there are a variety of things that they were looking at, and this one was the one that would pop first, and they wanted somebody good handling it, and they wanted to get it done.
Wait. There wasn't a document case until August of
Yeah, we were
2022. I'm
uh,
talking about, I'm going back in time
okay.
to Trump leaves the White House on a plane on January 20th. Merrick
Yes, I
Garland
witnessed that. I never cheered. Me and Jim Acosta had a drink, and each other, yay, we survived.
That's great. So let's do the timeline. Then comes March 11th when Merrick
Right.
Garland is sworn in.
Right?
March 11th. It's not till April of the following year that they begin the investigation after
Which investigation?
into Donald Trump's role in the insurrection.
See, I don't know if that's an accurate
That's
time.
what they say in the. That's when the formal investigation began, according to the Washington Post.
And so,
I
some of the defenders are saying that some of the
Okay,
people who are taking quibble with the Washington Post reporting have said that
yes,
the investigation actually began before. But to your point, then Jen, you also do have, and I'm glad you mentioned the New York case, where Michael Cohen actually gets convicted and goes to jail, and literally he says, the person number one
is
is
Donald.
Donald Trump.
individual one, yeah.
Individual one is
Yeah.
Donald Trump, and nothing happens. And then now, I think when did Bragg actually issue the indictment? It was just last month, right? Or 2 months
Yeah,
ago?
No, it was
slow-
December.
they
December of
slow rolled that,
December. Yeah.
and almost, and they thought, in fact, it had been dismissed at one point, that Bragg had given up and then picked it back up.
That alone, Jen, is so frustrating, and was frustrating if you remember to a lot of the Nerd Avengers who discussed it. Is like we all knew who individual one was, and Michael Cohen goes to jail, comes out of jail, tells the whole world, by the way, folks, I did this for Donald Trump. I went to jail for this. But the person who's an individual one is running for president again. Slow
Right.
walk that, the January 6th insurrection, what's happening in Georgia. And then finally, Merrick Garland, I think, does the right thing and appoints Jack Smith, who, he seems like a man on a mission. So that's the person who actually gives me
It's Marshall
some.
Dillon, man. I'm telling you.
He's efficient. He's like a killer, man. He's
He's a shark. I say he's got the shark doll's eyes.
So I have to, guys, I've got to update something. Even though we wanted to move on from Hunter Biden, we have a note from our producer, Simon, saying that the reporting was incorrect. Let me just read this. A correction: Hunter Biden reaches deal to plead guilty to tax charges, admit guilt on gun charge. A previous alert misstated the gun charge deal. The agreement, which must be approved by a judge, would involve the son pleading guilty to 2 misdemeanors tax charges and admitting guilt on illegal weapons possession charge related to lying about the drug use on the handgun application. So we're correct about this. The everything except the earlier reporting indicated that they were going to defer any kind of prosecution on the gun charge, but it sounds like he's got to plead to that.
Dun dun dun.
Okay,
I mean,
back to so
At
Brian,
least there's
you're- go ahead.
accountability now. I mean, the law and order.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Brian, I think your most compelling point is one, that the reporting was wrong, that there was actually informal investigations going on, and they
Yeah.
just didn't want people to know it was formal. And two, I think you're saying is, the documents case ripened a lot faster and is a lot clearer. Is that what you're saying?
I I think we're all second guessing and we don't know. We're all sitting on the outside, not on the end. And the prosecutors that I've talked, well, to go back to my point about Jack Smith, and Waj, I think I said it. He looks like Coach Beard. He acts like Columbo, and he'll devour you like a great white shark. I think the seriousness of what they're doing with Donald Trump on that case is apparent by who they put in charge of it. I think it's harder to make the cases on. They've got to have someone flip. They've on January 6th. There's got to be
Mark Meadows, Brian.
Yeah, that's who it exactly. That's my point. If he's flipped, we got a case, and that's I'm sure that's where they're at right now with that. The Georgia case is also, you're going to need someone that it's all about intent, and you know that as well as I do, Jen. So I don't know what they've done behind the scenes. I know some of the reporting, but the reporting that I've heard is also contradicted by the things that have been told to me by prosecutors. I've always said I think, having known Merrick Garland and having covered him in the past, I know he's a serious-minded guy. He's very meticulous, loves to every T crossed, every I dotted. And I know Jack Smith is a no-nonsense guy. He's a no bullshit guy. So I've been one of those guys saying, have faith that the indictments will come.
You've been
I still
consistent
believe
on that.
Yeah, and go ahead, Waj.
No, I think both things could be true at the same time. Whereas the frustration with Merrick Garland and even the Biden administration, Democrats in general, who always bend the knee, is that you still have Christopher Wray at the head of the FBI, literally right now, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, like, here's a hatchet man for the Republican Party who's been appointed, and from the reporting that we've seen now, when you have the frustration of your own agents who are not being more aggressive, and especially as Donald Trump is openly admitting his crimes, right? And the fact you have the frustration, the history, and the legacy of the double standards. The double standards are applied, Jen, right? Like the fact if you're rich and you're white and Republican, you just seem to get away with it if you just whine and complain. And the fact that, as Brian said, Merrick Garland, for better and for worse, I would say, has this history of being both an institutionalist and an exceedingly meticulous man who takes his time. And then you sit there and go, and I think that the criticism, Jen, is legitimate. Was Merrick Garland the right guy at this time for this particular case, knowing all of that? Now, what's done is done, but I think I want to give a moment to all those who are frustrated to say it's okay to be frustrated, and at the same time acknowledge what Brian said is correct, and we still don't know how this is going to end. And maybe Jack Smith finally coming in, and the fact, I will say this, Donald Trump, who, again, I want to point to yesterday's Bret Baier interview, has made it so impossible not to prosecute him, right? Like, that has become so egregious that in a sense that it is one of those situations where, maybe the FBI and Merrick Garland, Christopher Wray, who probably, I don't know, I'm not God, I don't know what's in their hearts, maybe they would have wanted to avoid this, are like, we got to do it. Like, it's so egregious. Even with the documents case, real quick, Jen, they gave him so many opportunities to turn in the documents. He refused. They gave him so many. Even with Hunter Biden, people forget that they gave Donald Trump an opportunity to plead guilty to like a misdemeanor and get done with this. And Donald Trump's like, no, I'm just going to go ahead and do what I want.
And can I? Yeah. So this is what I'm glad you pivoted. I'm glad you pivoted, Waj. And this is because it's going to.
That's why they pay me the big money, Jen.
Yeah, I know. The check's not in the mail for you. I'll send it to you by Zelle. Your Zelle.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay. Actually, should I just put it in your Lego account?
Just Venmo me. And after you send it to me, just rescind the Venmo.
Have you ever done that to somebody?
I've never done it, but it's been done to me.
Okay. So, Brian, you're going to love this topic. Waj brings up Bret Baier on Fox News. And on so many levels, I'm glad Donald Trump did that interview. I've only seen snippets of it. On Twitter. I want to watch the whole thing now, but
get your popcorn and beer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a beer drinker, but
it'll make you one.
Okay. But so the good news about this is I've always felt, and anyone observing thinks this, that there's the court and then there's a court of popular opinion with him. And given all the delays that are expected, at least until some news we heard today, the fear is he's just going to repeat big and little and medium-sized lies over and over and over again until the public believes that he's being persecuted and he did nothing wrong, and they can't tell the difference between someone inadvertently holding onto documents versus what he did. So that was the fear. And then he does this interview with Bret Baier. And to the extent that any of his supporters watch that and now don't just turn off Fox News because they now think that they're traitors. What do you think the effect, Brian and Waj, of that interview? And maybe for those who didn't have the stomach to watch it, maybe one of you can say basically all of the things he confessed to and all the crazy shit.
Everything. but that's, look, he did that in South Carolina in his public speech. He's going to incriminate himself. He can't. He does not understand the difference between the court of public opinion and an actual criminal court. He believes that he can go into that what he says. And look, everything that he's saying is to drive his narrative so he can continue bilking his people. And they already believe that he had the authority, that all he had to do was think it, and it was declassified, that the Presidential Records Act protects him when it doesn't, that they were going after him on purpose, and that they let everybody else get away with it.
But be specific. I mean, you're saying everything, but let's be real specific. Bret Baier asked him, let me just ask you, what did he say when Bret Baier asked him, we have you on tape, or the Department of Justice apparently has you on tape, waving a document around that you had not declassified that reveals secrets about plans to contingency plans to attack Iran. What does he say about that?
That wasn't the specific document that he had in his hand. He was alluding to a document that he may have seen. When he talks about
also, what were he said these were not documents, they were papers.
Yeah, well,
newspapers. What is he
also says? Listen, he also says that he hired the best people. When he walked him through all the people he hired and fired, he couldn't really defend.
Well, he had a good defense. He said, 1 out of 10 is bad, although that was like 10 out of 10. But.
And he did multiple things at once. First, he called it a document hoax. Remember that?
Yeah.
And then when Bret Baier used his own quotes in the audio against him, he essentially admitted it. Like, he admitted this allegation in the indictment. And then he also got pressed. This was interesting, and this is why I'm very curious to see how Fox moves forward with Trump, because Bret Baier also pushed him on the election lie, and Donald Trump got very offended. For those who don't mention, and he straight up said, "You lost." And
wait. It's so funny. Wait, let's back up on that. It's hysterical what the question actually was. Bret Baier said, "What are you going to say to try to win back suburban women voters?" After basically, you lost last time because of women. What are you going to do to win the women back? And he doesn't have an answer to that, but that's Waj when he says, I didn't lose. I didn't lose, right?
And he says, you lost. And then he gets really upset at him. And so it is interesting. And I want to stay here. It's not a pivot, but it's interesting. The bar is so low, everyone, that the fact that Bret Baier, who actually, could do a good job if he wants to on Fox, did basic journalism, right? Did follow-ups, use his own words against him, try to get an answer. I don't think they were real gotchas. And Donald Trump is perhaps the worst client a lawyer could ever have. Like, if I was a defense attorney, that's why so many people quit.
That's why he can't find one.
He's a gift to the prosecution. And you sit there, and the fact that Fox News essentially probably helped Donald Trump convict himself, if indeed there's fair justice, right? It is a situation where the MAGA base has been primed by Trump and by Fox to be so conspiratorial, to be so vengeful, to be so violent, that I'm very curious if they'll turn on Fox, because it seems clear that Murdoch and Fox now want to turn the page on Trump, because based on what we've all been saying, especially what Brian's been saying with Jack Smith, I think they believe the writing is on the wall. That guy's going down, and Trump, even in the interview, didn't look well or as confident as he usually does. He seemed a little bit off kilter. But now this is what happens. Fox has created this monster that has turned on it, and now they're accusing Fox of being the puppet of the left and the deep state. Fox isn't right enough, so now they're moving to Newsmax. I'm very curious how they balance this, especially leading up to 2024 election, where despite all this, folks, DeSantis is a distant number 2. So they're stuck with Trump.
How do the numbers work if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is in the race? Does he steal votes from Biden or does he steal votes from Trump?
Both.
But
He
it's
will
going to
take-
hurt Biden more.
It'll hurt Biden more, but he will take votes from both. But
So that's the
not-
landscape. That's our landscape. Listen,
Well,
Trump
that's
is
not
not
the issue
stupid.
right now.
He's
It's-
not
it's-
stupid. He
not
knows that the
stupid.
only way he can win is with a third party candidate.
Well, and now he'll have 2 of them maybe. But to Waj's point, that's we don't really know where we are yet in the presidential primary season. It's still months and months away, and there's still many things that can happen. And I still think that, if Fox is turning the page on Trump, who are they turning the page to? And if it is DeSantis, like Waj, you said, he's a distant second. That's why there are many more. I always say, look, the Republicans are nothing if not vicious. They want to win at any cost. So where does this lead them, this desperation? And that's where we have to look forward to. And it ain't going to be DeSantis. And it probably won't be Christie. But
What?
that's
Not Christie. Oh, then it must be Nikki Haley.
well, God, no.
Wait, can I say something real quick before we move on to some other topics? Is I don't want people to sleep on this RFK thing. I know it's easy for us to dismiss him as a crank because he says ridiculous things. He's been saying ridiculous things for many years.
Right.
Anti-vax conspiracies, frogs turning gay and then kids turning gay because of tap water. Folks, I've traveled around America. I've traveled around the world. I've had a lot of tap water. I'm very straight or I'm very thirsty. I think it's because I'm straight. Tap water doesn't make you gay. But you have RFK, who's a conspiracy theorist who has his last name, Kennedy, has the celebrity appeal. His wife is Cheryl Hines, who was in Curb Your Enthusiasm, who's completely complicit in this. And he's being backed by Jack of Twitter, Elon Musk, and Joe Rogan. And for those of you who haven't spent time in the internet ecosystem and swamp, you'd think, oh, well, it's not a big deal. These men are exceedingly influential. And so there is a reason why Robert F. Kennedy, despite being an utter crank, is polling at 17%. And maybe I might be too wary, but living through life and the 2016 election, remembering the 2000 election, I don't think anything to chance. And you have to see what I think is, and it's not just RFK, Jen. The real question is, why are all these rich white men backing RFK, who only hurts Biden? That's my concern leading up to a year and a half, moving up to the election.
Well,
I don't think I'm not minimizing him at all. I remember
it's not his celebrity, though.
what?
It's not his celebrity the reason why Robert F. Kennedy gets traction is the issues, the nuts on both sides that are already tempted to believe in the things that he says. The money behind it from the crazies, you're right, Waj, is partly to dislodge Biden among anything else. But the real reason why he gets traction, it's not his celebrity, it's his dead father's celebrity.
Well, and there's more.
And it's the fact that his father was a civil rights activist, was gunned down. For the older people who will vote and spend money on this election, that's the appeal. That's the frightening part, because that's among everything else, that's an unknown factor that you don't know how it's going to factor in going forward, and it's going to get ugly.
And let me just add, because no one is one-dimensional, and so we've got, yes, he says a lot of offensive and kooky things, but let's put the things in terms of a political figure running for office. He's got the name recognition, the nostalgia for his father. He's got a story of overcoming addiction, incredible environmentalist, and exceedingly attractive in that kind of politician Kennedy style way. And so those are the things that will help. And finally, most importantly, there are a lot of anti-vaxxers whose memory and people who are still angry about the pandemic and just will kind of cling to him. And it doesn't even matter. The bottom line is, it's just a few percentages here and there in the states. People know the math. This
6 states, 100,000 votes will make the difference in this race.
Hillary
And
lost
anything
by
that Kate votes-
37,000 votes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we know
That's-
this.
Well, and
And
what
Jill
did Biden win by?
Jill
It was-
Stein hurt her for
and
sure.
and also the cult of Rogan and Musk. Don't underestimate it. Maybe I spent
that's
too much
right.
time and researching these folks, but I mean Rogan's influence, especially on young and middle-aged men,
Yes.
is just terrifying. But it gives you a snapshot of America.
And the
sounds
youth
like a folk
issue.
rock band. Rogan
He's
and Musk.
young. How old is he? In
Yeah.
his early 60s? What is
Who?
RFK? What is he? Early 60s?
I think 60s.
Yeah, he's a little older than I am. I think he's mid-60s.
And young people, young people who were voting for Donald Trump back in 2016, some of my students, I was very surprised when I was working at Vermont Law School and the environmental people there. You wouldn't think they would, but they just knew him from The Apprentice. And so what are young people going to
69.
know?
I'm sorry, he's 69.
Well, he looks young. And, he the environmental stuff, if he plays that up. Anyway, so here's, again, I raised him not because I think he doesn't have a chance, but I think that he could deliver the election to Donald Trump.
And
I
that
don't
and
think
that and
Donald
last thing
Trump's
I'll
gonna
say,
be
and
able-
I know you want to move on to other topics, Jim, but what I will say is that's for those who are watching, that's exactly why he's being backed by rich folks. All these folks were behind DeSantis. They realize, like we've said on this show, that he's a wet noodle, and they're like, okay, let's throw the wrench in for these 100,000 votes in these 6 states, and maybe this will do it. So I am not sleeping on this. Or if RFK fizzles out, to prop someone else. Look at the
Yep.
people propping him.
Yep, that's right.
Well, look
So-
what they've done out in California with Newsom. They're putting him as a viable alternative. And Fox has interviewed him. He's had a couple of specials done on him. MSNBC did something on
I
him.
don't think he'd run as a third party.
No, I don't
candidate.
think he would run as a third party. That's not my point. My point is that's what they would look at as an alternative within the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
to
2028.
Okay, I got 2 topics to cover, and you can choose which one. We can choose first. Eileen Cannon announcing in court documents that as early as August 14th, I mean, we think that will slide the date when the trial could commence in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. Obviously, it might be delayed, but that's her first plan. Or we can talk about the submergible, which is nightmare fuel. These people in a tin can at the bottom of the ocean.
I've seen
Titanic.
that movie.
I
It
vote
doesn't
Titanic.
turn out well.
We're talking about rich people. Let's go to Titanic first. That's my
Let's
vote.
do the Titanic. So I got a couple things to say. I feel like I've seen the Brady Bunch movie on this. Like it seems like it's so taboo, and you are bringing the evil eye to yourself if you are spending $250,000, jamming yourself in a tin can and sinking to the bottom of the ocean to gawk at other people who sunk to the bottom of the ocean to their deaths, to their graves.
The irony of dying that way.
But I wouldn't even go in that thing even on land. I am freaking out even thinking and talking about this. Your thoughts, Waj?
I'm not cruel, so I hope that they are found.
Me too.
At the same time, it's like rich people, man. Like it perverts the brain and does some wild stuff, because exactly the fact that you would pay an obscene amount of money to go in what is a questionable submarine, and just to gawk, right? You're not doing documentary. Because at first I thought, I'm like, oh man, when I first read it, I assumed it was like what Jim Cameron and other people do, right? To get footage. And I'm like, oh, that's so sad. And then I read more. I'm like, wait tourism? I'm like, Titanic tourism? Huh? And then you see that, I'm like, oh, of course, rich people stuff. They'll go to space. They'll go to the depths of the ocean. And we're like, can you just pay your taxes? We just want you to pay your taxes. Like, no. Instead of that, we're going to fly away to space and go visit the Titanic. So it's one of those situations where it is, like you said, it's like bringing the evil eye on yourself and history going back full circle, where a bunch of rich folks pay an obscene amount of money to go and gawk at the ego and hubris of the Titanic, where a lot of the folks were saying, even God can't bring down the Titanic, and an iceberg did. So it's one of those situations that it unfortunately becomes a lesson for the rest of us. But because I'm not cruel and vicious, I do hope they're found. But
Of
again,
course.
man, rich folks.
And it's horrifying. I want them to be found. And at the same time, I realize how much money is going from taxpayers. So when they are found,
That's right.
I want them to get the bill, though.
Well, remember what Lewis Black said about rich people? He had the best joke about that. He said, if he ever made that kind of money, he wouldn't be doing stupid shit like that. He said what he would have is have a personal hygiene washer. And
Nice choice. Nice editing there.
Yes.
And I know you want to talk about Eileen Cannon real quick, but Jen, I also want to say, I know this might seem like a shift, but I have to give a shout out to the writers because of this money, this obscene money that the rich have, right? I don't think people realize, because they haven't looked at the charts and they haven't studied. And every time we can take a piss at Reagan, we should. In the past 40, 45 years, specifically with the rise of Reaganism, income inequality has widened in America to the point where everyone says, oh, these workers are lazy. No, American workers are very productive. Productivity has increased. Wages have not, right? So the rich have gotten richer, especially in the past 10 years. And you sit there and you go, well, what could you do with this wealth? This is what they do with their wealth. And then when it comes to workers, right now there's a writer strike, everyone. And these writers are demanding a living wage. That's pretty much it. And these streamers instead are making an obscene amount of money, but not giving the money to these writers. And just to bring in another story real quick, The Flash.
Sorry. Streamers, be more clear about what you mean, streamers.
Netflix, well, the streamers, now everyone's into the stream. So Warner Brothers, HBO
Yes.
Max, right? Disney's into streaming. Streaming's the future. And all these writers who provide the content, they're not getting what the residuals that they used to get from, say,
broadcast
because the way the contracts are working out,
They're not even getting, as you said, not even getting a living wage, and this is a long time problem.
Yeah, well, real quick, let me finish. Let me finish this point real quick. Is that the Flash? They spent $300 million on this movie around a problematic star. They canned Batgirl for a tax write-off of $90 million, and a lot of people were pissed off because it was the first Latina black girl, Batgirl. Zaslav, by the way, who's the head of CEO, the head of Warner Brothers / CNN, comes in. You saw what they did to CNN. They also killed Warner Brothers Animation, which was the one bastion of DEI. Kill that off, and now the Flash is going to lose $300 million. And I'm sitting there thinking, if you just weren't greedy bastards, like instead of burning that $300 million, Jen, could you not have given half of that to your writers? Just something
you
I
could
want to
have
bring
paid
up.
for like more than 1,000 people to go in a submergible.
Time out. Time out for this important commercial message. Nothing that you see on television that is fictional, and a lot that pretends that it isn't, would not be possible without the writers. That's where it starts, in the imagination of a writer. Then finding someone who will buy that and put it, or if you're hired as a staff writer, coming up on a weekly basis with the stuff for a show. But it all starts here with the people who have the imagination.
That's
and
right.
They're the ones that get screwed the most. And that's it. And Waj, to your point, you brought up something I love every time somebody brings this up. The disparity in income in this country began with Ronald Wilson Reagan. He crushed.
Why do you never mention Reagan?
He crushed it. He crushed.
What do you think about Reagan, Brian? We never heard.
I can't stand that SOB. He's the biggest. He created everything that we're living through today and made possible Donald Trump. So anytime, I just want to thank you for bringing up my favorite bugaboo.
So let's talk about Eileen Cannon. Shockingly, this judge in Florida may be working faster than we thought she could, faster than even Merrick Garland. What's going on with that? We learned some news.
Realize she was turned over in some earlier decisions that she made that favored Donald Trump. She's looked upon as a minion. She was appointed by Donald Trump. Yep. She's looked at as part of the cult. Now, she's got very little experience. If she wants to be thought of seriously, and Jen, you know this, and Wise, you both know this well. If you want to be thought of seriously as a federal judge with a future in that, you want to make sure that your decisions are not overturned.
That's right.
Appeal. So she's got that staring her straight in the face, and she wants to. This is the tail of the tape and the test of her mettle. If she's going to sit on this case and be thought of as a serious jurist, she's going to have to play it straight. And so far, well, in this first decision, at least it wasn't, for Donald Trump. But we have
Hmm.
to watch her very carefully going forward.
I'm very curious to see, and it goes back to the Fox News analogy, the same cult that has created these minions. Are they loyal to Trump to the end, even if it comes at self-immolation, or is there an exit ramp? And
Good
you're seeing both. You're seeing those
exit
who
rants.
yeah, you're seeing the lemmings who are going to follow him right off the cliff. And then you see the careerists, and as we know, and this is what's so depressing is, I've shared this before on Mary Show many times. When I was officially with CNN for a year in the green room, used to meet a lot of these people before you went on the panels with them or when it went on
Yeah.
debates. Pretty much every single Republican who defended Trump except two, Paris Denard was one, and I think Jeffrey Lord was another. All of them hated Trump. And here
Yes.
they are in the green room telling me how much they hate Trump, and then they go
Yes.
on because their bread is buttered this way, they defend Trump. Those are careers. So Eileen Cannon and these other judges, as Brian was saying, this is the off-ramp moment. Do I sit here and go all in with a guy who is literally self-incriminating himself, or do I pretend to be competent to have a future and move up for the next, hopefully competent Republican who becomes president, who's still a Trump, not a Trumper, but like Trumpism is the future, right? So that's the calculation that they're playing. I'm very curious to see. I don't have faith in her. I'm much more cynical than Brian.
We'll see. I
I have a
mean,
wide open eye on it. I really haven't made a decision. I don't know. I do know this. You've made an excellent point in the fact that they're looking for off ramps. And there are many people, and I've sat in those green. It used to piss me off. And Eric Swalwell tells a great story about going into the bathroom during one of the hearings and having, I can't remember whether it's probably Ted Cruz, who said, "Hey, you're doing really good out there." And he's like, "Jesus Christ, you're an ass. You're an idiot." I mean, everybody who's ever faced those people know exactly what you're dealing with. It's one face in front of the camera, another face in private, and probably a third when they get home.
Yep.
And so Eileen Cannon showing this face is, if we're going to be cynical about it, or if we're going to take it at face value, maybe even, it's her off-ramp moment. And I think there are plenty of people who will be seeking that off-ramp as they find that Donald Trump is going to go down. And it's not being, and you're watching him self-immolate on television. It's every speech he makes, every time he sits down to talk, he incriminates himself. And if you're Jack Smith, all you got to do is go roll tape.
So one thing we haven't spoken about, because Dahlia's not here, is what we can expect from the Supreme Court in these final weeks of the term. I am anxiously waiting to see what their ruling is going to be on student loan forgiveness. Are you all watching for anything at the court?
Affirmative. I think my real quick is what Roberts has done in the past, and I think this is what's going to happen now. Is they did something that was very good to protect Native American rights and adoption rights.
The Indian Child Welfare Act was preserved for another day.
And Gorsuch on this issue, for whatever reason, has shown his one small glimpse of humanity consistently throughout his career. Usually when they do one good thing, it's an avalanche of shit that is on the way. And if you've just seen it, I'm sorry, I would try to be more subtle about it, but that's what's going to happen. They're going to kill affirmative action. I think they're going to kill the student loan debt relief program. I think it's just going to be, Jen, like a horrific summer from the Supreme Court. I hope I'm wrong. I'm not. I've been preparing it for a while, but I think it's going to be brutal. That's my
Well, I mean, I'd rather brace myself for that. I'm exceedingly nervous about both of those, and both of those obviously affect higher education, which is already too expensive and too inaccessible. And the private for-profit schools have bilked people, and the public universities don't get the kind of support they need.
And Jen, real quick, an active 60-year assault on public schools by the right.
Yeah,
to dismantle the public
and that started with Ronald Reagan in California. Sorry, Brian.
that started post desegregation. Betsy DeVos has done it right with money, and they deliberately are trying to defund public schools now and say, look, do you want your kid to go to a piece of crap public school that we defunded, or do you want homeschooling in charter schools and religious schools? And then also the case now that's probably going to go to the Supreme Court, Jen, about the religious school in, is it Ohio, getting government funding. that's the future. So what I just want to raise the alarm on this and have people pay attention is that everything that's happening right now, CRT, wokeness, attack on educators, don't say gay, attacking transgender, is all part and parcel of this 6-decade-long assault on public education that is now ramped up on steroids. And affirmative action with the Supreme Court's blessing is going to be them taking out a huge pillar that supports just basically equity in education. It's they're coming after our kids in schools. And also the final thing is that the teachers union, they knock out a potential what they call an enemy, because teachers, like labor, oftentimes votes Democratic, and in its place, for-profit private schools, religious schools, where they won't be indoctrinated about evolution and the existence of gay people. Something to think about and worry about in the next
So-
Or
5
any
years.
other type of science.
What
Or
about
math.
this, guys? For our final few minutes, I'd like to know, since you hold yourselves out to be nerds, what nerdy kind of fun thing you're doing that might be outside of the explicitly political realm. I know the personal is political, blah, 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 but really, outside of partisan politics, what nerdy thing are you up to, Wadge O'Brien?
I'm binge watching Rick and Morty.
Very nerdy. Very
What's
nerdy.
that? I keep hearing about that. Is it good?
I've been binge watching Rick and Morty and their mega metaverse. So I can't.
Okay.
I'm doing 2 super nerdy things. Just yesterday, I finished the second third of the epic Lego Titanic set, and I was gonna take a photo of it because
Nerdy.
I was so impressed. But I'm like, timing is off. I'll wait. It's like as big as a child. I'll send a photo later to you guys. It's obscene. It's ridiculous. And then the second thing I'm doing, which is super nerdy, is I have these last 2 weeks, which have been a little not as crazy. I mean, when you're a writer, and Brian knows this, it's feast and famine. Sometimes you're just work, and then sometimes it's like, there's a month that's like loose. So I've been studying how to write screenplays, which is something I've always wanted to do.
Ooh.
And I've been reading screenplays and then watching the movie version of those screenplays and trying to figure out how they break down the acts and stuff. And I've always been enticed to do it. So I've actually I took 2 master classes on it, one by Shonda Rhimes, one by Aaron Sorkin. I just looked at them, and I've been reading screenplays and watching these old classic movies at night. And then
Which ones?
maybe if I
Yeah,
can get
which
off the butt,
classics?
I'll write a screenplay.
What classics are you? I want you to do that. I'm going to the movie. I've already picked out my outfit. What I know you haven't made it yet, but what old classics are you enjoying?
I am a small movie buff. If people don't know, I rewatched Sunset Boulevard.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, rewatched Chinatown. Rewatched
Yes.
No
Movie.
Country for Old Men, Miller's Crossing, Fargo. Gonna watch
Fargo,
Some
my
Like It
gosh.
Hot. So some of these really good.
Like Billy Wilder, you like?
Yeah, Billy Wilder,
Dressing
Coen
up
Brothers,
as a woman.
Tarantino,
Oh my
like, these are
God.
excellent screenplays, and for those of you who want to see a good movie, a timeless movie. I mean, I forgot how good it was. Sunset Boulevard still holds up.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
fantastic movie.
I got one for you.
Okay.
If you want to go back and look at an old movie, and it's a comedy, and it's got Aldo Ray in it, and it's got, let's see who else is in it. Blackbeard's Ghost, that guy, and of course my favorite Sam Spade, private detective guy in it. You got to see My Three Angels, and it's a great movie. We're My Three. Well, actually, I think the movie version is We're No Angels, and
and they remade it. They remade it. The remake with De Niro and Sean Penn is
horrible.
terrible. Watch the
it's
original.
the 55. It's the 1955 version that you want to see with Aldo Ray, Peter Ustinov, and Humphrey Bogart.
And
Okay,
speaking of
I'm
Aldo
giving
Ray and
you-
Bogart, I saw Casablanca again.
Uh-huh.
It's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, I saw it for like the 3rd time just last week. It's a great movie.
Well, yeah.
Now, guys,
But
let's
the
go.
last line, wait a minute. I hate it, but the
Yeah.
last line in the Billy Wilder movie is "I'm a man." Nobody's perfect.
I love Some Like It Hot. Okay, I'm making you guys do this. There's not one favorite movie, but if there's one movie you'd recommend, classic movie or even modern one for people to watch, I'm going to tell you mine because I haven't watched it in a while, but it's one of my very favorites. It's called Sullivan's Travels.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. One of the best written
Really
movies.
fantastic movie. How about you folks?
Well, I know this is going to sound.
Oh, wait. Sorry, one more. And The Player. Given the writer's strike, I
Oh,
think
yeah,
The
yeah,
Player.
fantastic.
Well, there's this old movie I laughed at a lot. It's old now, but it was made in '86, so it's not all that old to me. But it was Bruce Willis, Hudson Hawk. You can't take the movie seriously. From the moment it comes on, I did nothing but laugh, and I still watch it and laugh to this day. But 2001: A Space Odyssey is when I always.
Okay.
I know we're out of time, but I will say this: Hudson Hawk failed miserably when it first came out, but in the
Yes.
last 30 years has built up a cult audience. So well done, Brian. And Sullivan's Travels by Preston Sturges is often seen as
Harold and Maude.
one of the best
Harold and Maude,
screenplays.
yep.
And if you haven't seen it, it's a good commentary on why people go to the movies. Do they want
Yes.
hard edge realism, or sometimes in times of immense despair, like now, is the job of the entertainer to do just that, to entertain?
Yeah.
I will say this: I just finished, and the movie I would recommend, and I'm going to recommend two books that I'm reading, which I think gives you a snapshot of America. New York Times right now asked about 17 critics, what's one book, movie, art that explains America? Now I was thinking about that. So as far as movie goes, Jen, for your question, The Godfather,
Oh, yes.
1 and 2.
Okay.
And then as far as books go, I finished rereading Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye.
Love it.
And I'm reading Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. And if you really want to understand America and the violence that is inherent in this country that oftentimes is never confronted or accounted for, but leaves lasting trauma, the two authors that really understand that violence and can write it very poetically, Toni Morrison and Cormac McCarthy, who just passed away last week.
And if you want to escape all of that, there's some good escapism at the movies right now. I'd go see Bert Kreischer and Mark Hamill in The Machine.
Okay.
Mark Hamill steals it. It's the funniest damn movie. It's the best fun I've had in a movie theater since before COVID. And you forgot, when you're in a movie theater, it's that shared experience, that shared laughter, all that.
Yes.
I forgot all about that. And I sat down in this crowded movie theater and I hadn't laughed this hard since Blazing Saddles. So go ahead and have fun and laugh.
And with that, that's our motto for today's show. Go and have fun and laugh. Better to laugh than to cry.
Indeed.
We'll be here all week. Try the veal.
Thanks all.
Bye.
See you soon.